Hi friends, it's Brother Peter with the Gospel Reflection, Sunday evening, I guess. I got halfway through it and the timer went off for the stove, so I guess I'll start again from the beginning. Anyway, it's not really going to be a gospel reflection because the Old Testament reading from Friday, I found this reading very compelling, and so I actually reflected on it for midday service at Spiritus on Friday. So if you joined us for that service, you're just stuck hearing it again. So sorry to Kathy Baum Brayman and others who joined for both. And Buddy is right here next to me, so if he makes little noises, that's all that's happening. So the reason that we're sitting here is because this past week was the Feast of St. Anthony, so I thought we would sit in this corner because St. Anthony is behind us. A reading from the first book of Kings. At the mountain of God, Horeb, Elijah came to a cave where he took shelter. But the word of the Lord came to him, "Go outside and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and the Lord will be passing by." A strong and heavy wind was rending the mountains and crushing rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire there was a tiny whispering sound. When he heard this, Elijah hid his face in his cloak and went and stood at the entrance of the cave. A voice said to him, "Elijah, why are you here?" He replied, "I have been most zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, but the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." The Lord said to him, "Go, take the road back to the desert near Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king of Aram. Then you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king of Israel, and Elisha, son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah." Did I pronounce that right? Abed-Meholah, as prophet to succeed you. The word of the Lord. In other words, you're fired. So poor Elijah, you know, he went up on the mountain to listen for the voice of God. He expected the voice of God to be presented to him one way. God came in a whisper. Even in the whisper, Elijah was terrified and he hid his face. So to me, it's an interesting story. So I wrote up this reflection for Friday, and again, my apologies for those of you who already heard it at Spiritus or on the Spiritus live stream Friday. There were some notable feasts and celebrations this week, some joyous in nature, others deeply sorrowing. Monday was my 60th birthday. On the church calendar, it is a day to remember Antoni Gaudí, the world-renowned Spanish architect, being considered for canonization. Gaudí designed and built the great Basilica of Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. It is considered one of the greatest examples of architecture in human history. As Gaudí was delving deeper into the construction of the great church, he found himself drawing closer to the one he referred to as the master builder. He adopted an ascetic, monk-like life. He attended Mass daily, dressed as a simple workman, and quietly moved into the partially constructed structure, sleeping on a cot. On June 7th, 1926, he was struck by a streetcar in front of the church. Mistaken for a beggar, he was taken to the charity ward of the local hospital, where he died on June 10th. One of the most brilliant creative geniuses who ever lived died like a complete nobody by worldly measure. Think about poor Elijah in today's reading. He ascends the mountain expecting to interact with God, but is disappointed when he does not experience God in the windstorm, earthquake, or fire. Instead, he hears a tiny whisper. But in that tiny whisper, God asks him a powerful question. The same question each of us will be confronted with over a lifetime. Why are you here? I have traveled to the sacred sites of Christendom in the Holy Land where Jesus walked, to many of the great basilicas of Europe where saints sleep, to the mountaintop shrines of Japan where the samurai warriors worshipped, to the Grand Canyon, the American West, and the coastline of the Pacific Ocean from Oregon to Mexico. But was I hearing God in any of these dramatic places? Maybe, but not as clearly as I have heard that sacred voice in decades of AA meetings in church basements, in the pleasant chaos of children enthralled in creativity, while teaching art in our city schools for 32 years, at the bedside of my dying parents, in the quiet of my painting studio, and even in my experiences with my beloved dog Buddy and the many animals that we meet on our property. Maybe the challenge is to experience that sacred connection on any old Sunday afternoon, instead of the many contrived and well-trodden pilgrimage routes taken by spiritual seekers throughout time. Maybe my challenge is to hear that voice in you and to share mine as well, so that we can be joined in the sacred reality of God's love, the love Jesus taught us, and the love left behind in the Eucharist. But why are we here? I believe there is a unique assignment for each of us in the divine order, a destiny. You'll know you're in alignment with God's will when you experience serenity or deep peace over time, or the shalom which Jesus comforted the frightened apostles with in his resurrection appearances. This peace we feel in the center of our soul, despite the often bumpy road we'll be asked to travel. The shalom of Jesus is the deepest peace, imparted by the Prince of Peace. It is the peace we receive from him only inasmuch as we are willing to share it with others. This is required of us before we come forward each time we receive communion. This week was my birthday. It was also the 8th anniversary of the horrific murder of 49 young LGBTQ people in the Pulse nightclub massacre. It was the feast of St. Anthony of Padua, who I learned recently was one of Father Jim's favorites and the patron saint he chose at confirmation. There always seems to be a mixture of heartbreak and joy at play in this adventure. Today we remember Blessed Cosme Spessotto. Father Cosme was an Italian Franciscan murdered in El Salvador in 1980 as he prepared to say Mass. Like Father Rutilio Grande, who was murdered before him, and Archbishop Romero, who was assassinated after Cosme's death, he was an outspoken advocate for the poor. Father Cosme grew up in Italy at a time when bombings were quite common and had to relocate when his seminary was bombed, and around this time even endured ulcer surgery without anesthesia. So when he arrived as a missionary to El Salvador, he was no stranger to hardship. And why were they here? While one saint's job is to imagine a great basilica, another may be called into danger for the sake of justice and liberation as an advocate for the suffering. You and I are similarly called. We are sometimes moved to decisions that surprise and baffle others. Like Elijah, we simply know in listening to that tiny whisper, while ignoring the windstorms, fires, and earthquakes sent to distract us, the nature of our sacred purpose. We are sometimes called to take action, to withdraw, to change course, or to break through. We know, as my friend Craig at Assisi Institute often says, when to gamble everything on God. And oh, by the way, God may have plans for us we did not anticipate. Just like poor Elijah, when he was given his pink slip on the mountain and told to go and anoint his replacement, we will encounter betrayals, disappointments, and struggles. As you look back on all the plot twists over your lifetime, as I was able to do this week as I turned 60, if you've been true to yourselves and stayed the course, I hope you'll be blessed as I was, to be able to look back and admire the divine choreography woven through your life that had absolutely nothing to do with any effort on your part or my part. So if you've been climbing mountains, chasing earthquakes, traveling to dusty churches and faraway places, trying to find God, slow down, get quiet, and listen for that whisper. God is all around us, in the here and now. Find that quiet place, the place where you're centered enough to hear that gorgeous whisper, and just listen. Amen. Okay, everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful week. I will see you next Sunday. God bless you, everyone.